Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida. Dude, I'm telling you, dude. Dr. Narco Longo came on and dropped the hammer of the god.
America's mother, daughter of Atlantis. God sent the Weatherland. The devil sent the Spanish. Florida is Eden, the fountain of youth, Kalia's deception. So Florida is the truth.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Dr. Narco Longo.
Florida, it is everything. There's too much truth bombs being dropped. I can't digest it all.
Old World, Florida.
Please welcome Dr. Narco Longo.
What's up, guys? Hope everyone's having a good night. So, symbolic studies. We're joined by a heavy hitter, right? A familiar face at this point, and I love when this guy's on because I learn a ton. So today we're going to be talking about. I titled this the Astro-Etymology of the Underworld, but it'll be a lot more than that. Mario brings a lot to the table visually and a lot more on top of that. So it's great to mix the words with the symbols and you know, sort out the meanings. And well, Mario, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, you got it, dude. I'm stoked to be here.
So yeah, sweet. So forgive me if you've got a little noise in the background, but there's 3 zodiac signs I guess we're going to be focusing on today, right? And it's not just 3 signs of the zodiac, it's also what they represent in this time of year and beyond the year mythologically. Because in the fall time, which we happen to be stepping into right now, in the fall time, you find some of the most misunderstood mythology. Hey, mister. Hey, cut it out. With the fall time, you find some of the most demonized, misunderstood, kind of hysteric misinterpretations of some of these solar myths, because it's a sad time for the sun. That's kind of the starting point for the conversation that I see with the underworld. And fall time is the sun being struck down, losing his glory in the summertime. But Mario's prepared a nice presentation for us, so we'll let him take it away and we'll see where it goes. But where do you want to get started, Mario?
Yeah, you know, that's a great point regarding the misunderstanding of some of these signs. And obviously, it's completely understandable once you learn about them. So as an example, I don't know how you feel, but Scorpio is often acknowledged as being like the deepest sign in the zodiac. And there is so much to get into with Scorpio that I think it does take a while to kind of wrap your head around all of the different correspondences and things like that. There's even, you know, kind of, it's a well-known sort of correspondence, but 3 main aspects to Scorpio as an example, right? The scorpion, the serpent, the eagle. It's very bird-like. There's things to talk about with that. But I think one of the things I feel like makes sense because we still are in Virgo season is this idea of the veil. and then the veil thinning as well, and the veil concealing things, and what's concealed also reveals. And so that's definitely an aspect to, you know, what's going on right now as we descend into the fall. So I've been thinking about Virgo a lot lately. I've been producing content around Virgo and things like that. I've been talking about it on other streams. So this veil concept is something that's just really fresh in my mind, and it's just really pertinent. And you know, related to that, the thing with the veil too, and how it's been associated with Virgo is kind of amazing, because bridal symbolism to me is very much related to Virgo. Yeah, have you been thinking about that lately?
I was just gonna try and drop a bomb on that, but you took it. You took it out. That's perfect. Yeah,
it is.
Etymology. That's
100%, exactly. And so I even see a huge overlap between just queen symbolism in general being related to Virgo, the queen of heaven, and also being related to this maiden sort of idea and how she's veiled. And so symbolically, you know, it's this traditional sort of thing for women to be veiled and then unveiled, you know, on their wedding day, which symbolically is ending their virginity because now they have a husband. And virginity, too, used to mean something else back in the day. That's my understanding, that it essentially meant unwed. I've heard a couple of other translations for it, right?
No, you're absolutely right, because unwed, number one, wed goes back to Mercury. It's Wednesday. To wed is to fuse things, Mercury, merge. But then also with I slipped my thought.
No.
Marriage and mirage. You find on the same cup between Virgo and Libra. Libra rules aesthetic and deception, which we're going to get into a lot. Marriage, Libra rules marriage and mirage. So false appearances, but also partnerships, romantic partnerships.
Gotcha. I'm reminded of the fact, too, that the Lover's card corresponds with Gemini, which is ruled also by Mercury. And so I almost can't talk about a sign. I almost can't talk about a tarot card without bringing up Mercury as well. And so in my mind, like, I just have this huge reverence and appreciation for Mercury and all of the things it's shown me over the years. So even though it is the planetary correspondence with Virgo, it's going to come up a few different times here. Also because Mercury is a psychopomp, right? So a guide of souls or conductor of souls sort of idea, taking people to the afterlife or underworld or whatever. And so we'll be getting into all of that as well. And so we'll be talking about Virgo here in a moment, but I do have a few sort of slides just to kind of kick things off that are a little more broad in scale, I would say. So I ask you, have you seen these before? This is it's a older Germanic seasonal symbolic correspondence thing. So this is spring, summer, fall, and winter. Have you checked these out before?
I haven't.
You know, symbolically, they're very interesting. And so when I first came across them, I started studying them, and I just grew to really just like the way they put things out there. So as an example, with the spring glyph on the left, does that not represent the upper portion? Does it not look like Aries, the first sign of spring, right?
It looks like Aries and Taurus.
Exactly. Yes, 100%. It looks like Aries, it looks like Taurus. And then even the glyph of Aries, right, reminds me very much of a fountain as well. I know you've gotten into fountain symbolism lately, so it reminds me of a spring. It reminds me of life, right? It reminds me of a sprout, you know, coming to life, you know. And so that reminds me very much of spring. I love it with that big circle there too, kind of a circle of life sort of thing, the womb, sort of a generative sort of principles and things of that sort. And then we move on to the glyph for summer, and it actually looks a lot like an upside down Leo glyph. That's one of the things that kind of came to my mind. But it also looks like a vessel as well. And so it's meant to contain, it holds things. And it also, the Leo glyph reminds me of serpentine symbolism as well. And in fact, I've done videos on this, but there's a huge relationship symbolically, historically, with cats, serpents, and then also dragons. So much so that in my mind, when I look at any of these things, they're kind of synonymous and interchangeable. And once you kind of can see their relationship, a lot of things kind of come to light with that. Have we talked about this before by chance, the feline serpentine dragon thing?
I don't think you and I have, but I have a video on the hidden history of cats, about how small cats get their slit eyes, but big cats don't, and how the Egyptians believed cats, domesticated cats, were lions fused with cobras.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. When you look at the nature of the serpent and the feline, there's so much overlap. Some of the species of either, right, they have those slit pupils. They both have fangs. They both hiss. Even the way they fight and strike, very similar as well. And then, of course, cats have their tails. And so it's been said that some people have said that the power of the cat resides in its tail. That's one sort of belief. The other belief, too, is its mane, right? And being very expressive of kind of like solar energy, right? The rays of the sun sort of thing. So I get Leo vibes here with the summer glyph. And then now we're moving into the fall. And so I think it's fascinating that they decided to choose essentially an M, a stylized M for that glyph. And that reminds me of the glyphs for Scorpio and for Virgo. And as we'll be talking about, these two signs have a lot of symbolism related to each other. And it's almost like, two sides of the same coin sort of thing. There's even this understanding that they were essentially once the same sign, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. The way I've heard it put, and I'm not saying that this is exactly what I think, but that Libra at some point was introduced, which is kind of interesting too, because it's an air sign. Air symbolism relates to sword symbolism. What does a sword do? It cuts, it divides, it severs. So potentially Libra maybe did split up this gigantic sign into 3 smaller signs. And so then Virgo and Scorpio are on each side of the scales, right? Kind of in balance with each other. And even the glyph for Virgo, it's an M, but it's a closed, stylized M with that extra little portion in the lower right-hand side of it. And then the Scorpio glyph is open. And so this relates to their nature as well, I would say, in so many different ways. One is open, one is closed. And then with the M itself, I mean, it's a very feminine sort of internal kind of thing. You could probably wax poetic about the M and what it means.
Yeah, great points. You've got mama. If something tastes good, if you're saying, oh, this is, these are very feminine qualities, and Virgo and Scorpio are both feminine signs, earth and water. To me, the M represents the middle, the medi, because you have the verge, which is Virgo, then Libra, then the after, the middle. To me, this is why they were clumped together, because, when I teach or when I try and explain the qualities of Virgos and Libras, I find myself having to say they're a little bit of the most vanilla signs because of how close they are to the center. They have a little bit less individuality and a little bit more having to do with the shifting of that time of year. And I think so just for those that don't know, you have one M right before the evening of the zodiac and the evening of the day. Libra, one M, then Libra, then the other M. So Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. But
yes, exactly. It's such a fascinating setup. So we'll get into that. And then I love the fact that what they decided to depict here in the M is this cross, and it looks like an upside down cross. What this does visually is it really brings your eye downward, And the cross means so many different things. I feel like I used to have a really limited sort of scope or view of what the cross represented, but there is an earthy quality to the cross. So to me, the glyph itself, it draws your eye downward. And here during the fall, that kind of symbolism is really appropriate.
Also, what months would this include? This would be Scorpio, Sag,
Libra, Scorpio, Sag.
Okay, it's Libra, Scorpio, Sag. Okay.
Yeah.
So this to me, I see the cross as it's a Thor's hammer, Jupiter ruling Sagittarius, but you've also got the cross in the air of Sagittarius.
Yes. That's right. Exactly. Good point for sure. And then just the this drawing down sort of nature, thinking about leaves falling from trees, things are receding, nature is receding, and this is absolutely necessary, right? And so I thought that was worth showing, just the glyph for fall, because I don't hear it talked about too much, but I think that there is some symbolic value here. And then also you have the glyph for winter, and so it looks like a gate, right? Or it looks like a doorway, or it looks like a house of some kind. It looks like some sort of structure. And so I've read a couple of different things on what people speculate this to be. And I think that probably the best correspondence might be that it's actually like a storage house for grain, So this is what's kind of required depending on where you live, obviously. But grain has been associated with this thing that actually gets you through the winter. So during the harvest season, you're storing up for the winter, and you and your family or your village, you would be better off with this storage of grain than not. So this might actually be some sort of facility, like a granary sort of thing. Other people have said that it might represent like snow or rain or something like that. But nonetheless, I think that there's like a Saturnian sort of correspondence here as well. So Saturn is more of a compression sort of energy. There's more of it's a restrictive sort of thing, and people during the winter are going to go indoors, and so they're going to spend more time inside with their family and things like that. Everything kind of just gets drawn inward. That's a very, very wintry Saturnian sort of thing, because as you mentioned already, obviously the sun and its power is not present. And so then everything just kind of just withdraws to this inner sort of state. So I think that's kind of what it represents.
It's also the pi symbol for Pisces. 3.14 Pisces, Pi Day, and Pi Eating Day, both in Pisces.
Right, yeah. Exactly. It also looks like a torii gate as well. And so I believe that's like a Japanese sort of structure. And then it reminds me, too, of this idea of the gateway of man and the gateway of the gods. And so my understanding is this is like a Babylonian sort of thing, but the gateway of man was associated with Cancer. And so there's lots of feminine symbolism related to Cancer via the moon and everything else. And so it was thought that we come through Cancer, the gateway of Cancer. And then when we die, when we perish, we go through the gateway of Capricorn, which corresponds, with Saturn. And so there's a gateway sort of thing going on here, I think, undeniably.
Right.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right.
And so
moving on.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see where that thing's hiding. Boom.
There you go. Nice. Okay. So this is a Freemasonic tracing board, and there's a lot to decode here. So this is barely just scratching the surface, but I've talked about this at length in some presentations and videos. And so if people want to look into that, they're more than welcome to. But the main thing I want to focus on today is the arch. And you can see up top it says the Royal Arch. And so there's two pillars here. Generally, they're called Boaz and Jachin. And this arch stretches between the two. It connects the two. And you see that wedge at the very top, right? And so this is a keystone. And so notice that the keystone is, it has Cancer, the Cancer glyph right there in it. and this is the first sign, right, of summer. And so on the left-hand side, it starts with Aries, and then you see Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. Once again, the gateway of man I just brought up. You have Cancer, and then you have Leo, Virgo, and then Libra. And then notice that none of the other signs are present or shown. But when you look down below, at the very bottom of the image there, you're going to see a coffin, and generally you see other, imagery related to death and things like that. So you might see a skull and crossbones and things like that. And so to me, it's just very interesting that the Royal Arch tradition in Freemasonry, they show essentially the signs that are on the day side or light side of the zodiac, but the hidden night side of the zodiac, the underworld signs, aren't present, right? So I think that's very, very significant. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that this is like a system to understand the zodiac kind of in this fashion, with the, the spring season and summer season being day side, light side, and then also, fall and winter being more of like a root side, shadow side, night side, underworld sort of thing.
They do have the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac in the center here.
They do.
Which is
Yes.
Taurus, Leo, Scorpio as the eagle, and Aquarius as like a priest or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's like I said, this could be a whole episode in and of itself, is kind of decoding all of the different aspects of it. One of my favorite things is the 7 stars just underneath Cancer, and so obviously there's a conversation to be had about what 7 stars are these. The 7 wandering stars of the traditional planets, the 7 stars of the Pleiades, or what I like to refer to as, the 7 northern stars of like Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And so I think in a way they kind of all correspond with it. And that's some of what my presentation material is about, is decoding the 7 stars. And then also you got the G right there, the Freemasonic G, G being the 7th letter, in the alphabet. And then even too, the card that corresponds with Cancer, by the way, is the Chariot card, which is the 7th card of the major arcana. And then most of Cancer takes place during July, the 7th month of the year, right? So the 7 correspondence with Cancer is definitely a thing, for sure. But again, the main thing I wanted to point out is the zodiac wheel, or the portion of it that you can actually see.
Okay.
Nice. And then the next slide, actually, you're going to have to...
yeah, here, I'll bring up
there you
the other
go.
one.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay.
Just a little mistake on my end with what I chose to highlight.
Dude, my video presentations are like they're like collages of mistakes, mistake after mistake after. Don't worry, no.
I got you. Right on. Yeah, this one, I felt like it was just worth updating it real quick, sending you a JPEG, and then showing that, just so that we can be accurate for the people here. There we go. Yep. It looks essentially the same, but there was one sign difference. Everything was kind of skewed just by one sign. So you can see the upper portion, right? Aries through Virgo, the light side, and then Libra through Pisces. That would be the night side of the zodiac. And so, obviously with Aries and Pisces at the spring equinox, generally it's said, right, that's equal parts day and night. And then when you get to the transition between Virgo and Libra, it's also equal parts day and night. And so that's partly what the Libra scales symbolism is all about, is this balance. And in fact, that's what the card that corresponds with Libra is Judgment. And Lady Justice is always seen holding, those scales. And so this balance sort of idea during the equinoxes, right, is definitely a thing. Also, too, there's a few different opinions about the glyph for Libra as well, and like what it actually represents, which we'll get into when we talk about the sign. But one of the thoughts is that it could be a setting sun or a rising sun. And if that's the case, you're only seeing half of the sun, right? So corresponding with this equal parts day and night sort of business. But there you can see Virgo and Scorpio. One is a day side sign. The other one is a night side sign. And so this balance between the two really is incredible. I mean, I'm still like, the novelty has not worn off to me. And I feel like there's still more for me to learn about all of that.
Yeah, Virgo's the verge. So it's the verge right before the nighttime. But the Libra symbol for me, you could argue it's the scales going over a crossbar or a bar in the center that's not pictured. But to me, I see the setting sun, without a doubt. Libra rules the sun set, and it's the bringer of light, but it's a different light. It's Venus shining in the sunset. Now, also, Libra rules law, leasing. Why do you call the cops coppers? Because Libra rules copper, right? Or the brass. So I gotta call up the brass. You know, the ranking military,
interesting
police officials. But Libra rules law, legislation, these things. So with that, does anyone know what shackles used to look like? That's what they used to look like. So this could either be like not a guillotine. What do they call it when you're stuck like this?
Yeah, I know what those are.
Yeah. It pretty much looks like one of those, but that's also what old handcuffs used to look like. They'd be flat on one side and have a hoop on the other. So,
dude, brilliant! I love it.
Libra rules detention as well, because Saturn exalts in Libra, and Libra. One last one. Libra rules pleasing people, and what's pleasing to the eye, and what's pleasing to the senses. But it also rules policing the world. So policing and pleasing.
Nice, dude. I love it. Okay, so you mentioned the law, right? So when people want someone to get punished, they say throw the book at them, right? And so Libra is the first 5 letters of library, and there's lots of stuff relating to books and literature and the written word that corresponds with Libra. And then also, to your point, which I have a slide about that, but to your point regarding the shackles, one of the other thoughts behind the glyph is that it looks like a yoke, like an ox yoke. And so to me that's very interesting, which is very much related to this captivity sort of thing, or domestication sort of thing against their will or whatever. And so I like that correspondence, dude, with the shackles. That makes a lot of sense.
Whoa, you're pulling out some good ones with the throw the book, Adam. I had not put that one together. How about this one? Okay, and that's a good one. Libra rules book, by the way. So library. Libra to read is lier, but also you're talking about swords.
Yes.
And balance. What is a ballpoint pen? It's a lance and a ball and a lance. Shout out to the Bach Saga. But then you have swords is the word.
Exactly.
The pen and the sword. Libra writing. To read is lier. Libra. Light to look.
Yeah, beautiful, dude. I'm so into it. So we'll get into some more of this stuff when we come to the sign itself, because there's absolutely more to chew on with that. Nice.
I'll pull up next slide, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, cool. Let's see.
So I'll say, I think the book thing, by the way, part of the correspondence with books and Libra is the fact that scales were so important after the harvest season, so that you can weigh your your grains and things like that. And so even like LB, right, the abbreviation for pound, that was a measure of currency, right, Libra Pondo. And then also literally, like, we get the hashtag from Libra and Pound. I made a video about this. So my understanding is the LB abbreviation was written so quickly in people's ledgers that over time it literally morphed into the hashtag. So that's where we get the pound sign from. So that's the
Ooh,
correspondence.
pound sign.
Yeah. So if
Pound.
you
Guys, pound 411 or whatever, pound this, pound that.
Yeah.
Star. Good.
Exactly. So Libra is related to ledgers and bookkeeping as well, right? So I think of like a bookie, that's what they do for gambling purposes and things like that. So literally just making notations about your business and having a book, cooking the books, having your books, in balance, having them balanced, right? It's all correspondent stuff to Libra for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm starting off each sign with just, I believe actually, for the most part, with an illustration of the sign itself, right? So here clearly is Virgo. Man, a lot to say. I'll say, first and foremost, she is generally seen holding wheat. The star Spica is like the brightest star in the constellation, generally corresponds with wheat. It actually, in some of my resources, they corresponded with the fleur-de-lis as well, which is really interesting. So sometimes it's a flower, oftentimes, most of the time it is wheat, and then in her other hand, she's usually holding a palm branch. Palm symbolism is pretty deep, actually, and there's a lot of stuff to say about the palm and how it relates to Virgo. In my opinion, what they're essentially showing you is they're showing Virgo holding these items, but I think they're kind of symbolic substitutes for a child, not unlike the Virgin Mary, who's often seen holding Christ. And so Christ, as an example, the Virgin Mary, by the way, just to say it, it's an expression of Virgo, right? In so many different ways, right? It's the Virgin, she's the maiden, etc. But Christ was referred to as the branch as well. And here she is holding that palm branch. And then he's also known as the bread of life as well. And there's a lot of wheat symbolism that he's associated with. So during Holy Communion, you're going to eat that wafer, symbolic of, the body of Christ. And so she holds this palm branch and she holds this bundle of wheat. But I think, again, they're kind of substitutions for a child, potentially a child that she might have, down the road or whatever, without the assistance of a partner, by the way. That's the symbolism, right? Because she's a virgin. And so, go ahead. Oh, I didn't know if you were going to say something.
I was just going to say Virgo is also where we get virility or viril.
Ooh,
virile,
nice. Yeah, totally.
Virile. Yeah.
For sure. So it's not uncommon to see her with wings as well. And so she is known as the Queen of Heaven as well as the Queen of Earth. And so there's an as above, so below thing going on with Virgo. And so a lot of goddesses that are very much Virgoan in nature, they're associated with stars. And so they can be seen wearing a crown with stars, or even I would say like Nuit or Newt. She has stars within her body. And so she very much relates to the heavens or the firmament and, what's going on up there. Because, according to a lot of people, right? I mean, I'm inclined to think that the cosmos itself is very feminine. And so she corresponds with all of these different things. But I think that the symbolism behind the veil and behind the Virgin is that there's more than meets the eye. That, when a bride comes out, right, and she's prepared to get married and she's wearing all white and it's symbolic of purity and she's veiled and all this other kind of stuff, you're seeing the light side aspect of her. But she has the ability to procreate and have children. So the egg, the baby, the embryo, it develops within her womb, within the darkness. And so she corresponds with the heavens, and stars, nighttime, and obviously what's happening up there is very mysterious. And she corresponds with the earth as well, and the soil underneath your feet, right? So the fertility sort of symbolism is absolutely there. And I think it just kind of like, it should be said that a lot of things grow in the dark. You plant seeds under the earth, right? And they germinate in the dark. And so in some ways, I think that the kind of play or balance between Virgo and Scorpio is that she kind of represents the veil portion, and I think Scorpio kind of represents what's underneath the veil. I think that's kind of part of the deal here. But I've done a ton of, recently I've done some interviews and live streams and stuff getting into the symbolism relating the Virgin and the Lion as well. So just like in the Strength card, I think what you're seeing, I think what you're seeing is the relationship between Virgo and the Lion. And the implication is that the lion obviously is associated with being the king of the jungle. He's very radiant. He's very strong, all of these different things. Yet in the Strength card, he is timid and submissive. It kind of reminds me of like the Sophia demiurgic kind of storyline where the demiurge doesn't realize that there's a god above God, and it's actually the goddess. It's mom. It's woman. It's the feminine cosmos, if you will. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was just gonna say, if you ever meet someone who's a Cancer, Virgo, this is such a bad joke. If you ever meet someone who's a Cancer, Virgo, Leo, you can tell them, bitches be lying, because Cancer rules dogs, right? Virgo rules the bees, as you were kind of touching on.
Yeah.
And lion. So Libra is also, I should have mentioned earlier, Leo rules the lion, but Libra rules lying, because it's associated with the Libra, and the liar as well, meaning to sweet talk someone, to sing sweet spells, deceptive. You find that with Libra. Libra rules deception.
Very good,
illusion.
Dude. 100%, exactly, and that lines up for a few different reasons. The underworld thing, obviously, the night side of the zodiac, but then also too this idea of justice and trying to find out what the truth is, right, in the justice system or whatever, Lady Justice. And it's not uncommon for the justice cards to have some sort of eye symbolism, or Lady Justice is blind, right? So just kind of like, again, veiling or concealing and revealing is definitely a thing. And I think it speaks to like what you just said with the lion thing, for sure.
Yeah. And Virgo Virgo undoubtedly rules the entry into underground areas. You mentioned earlier about as above, so below with this Virgo symbolism. Well, Hermes is Mercury, but I have found that Mercury in the form of Hermes is more so attributed to Virgo, whereas Thoth is more attributed to Gemini. Thoth being the scribe and the messenger, Messiah, Mercury. He is the bird, the waiting bird, which rules, because Gemini rules weather. It's weather, this or that, weather this or weather, right? Gemini rules two possibilities, so it rules the weather. Weather's Geminis love the weather. My mom's a Gemini. She's stuck on the Weather Channel. And you've got blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. But Hermes, hermetic, we get with Virgo, not just hermetic principles like with the one Mario mentioned, but also the hermetic principles. So
right.
Hermetic meaning going into the cave, isolating. And you'll find Virgo, without a doubt, rules entry into underground passages. Virgo rules service to others. Anyone will tell you that. Service. Right. And this is like some would say their motto, I serve, but analyze or different interpretations. But
yeah, you got it.
Service is the surface. So they are getting under the surface, right? Service, surface. But how can we drive this point home? The word Virgo, okay, is go Gopher, the animal which bores underneath. And no offense, Virgos, you're the most boring sign by far, because they rule boring into the ground, right? And as we said, they're vanilla a little bit, but they're not boring. They're actually very exciting. Charlie Sheen, especially. But Gopher is they just took the word gopher, Virgo, and put it in front of each other, right? Front half to the back half, vice versa. Gopher, Virgo. This is the animal which bores underneath. So, yeah.
Excellent, dude. I'm so into it. You're bringing all sorts of stuff to mind. One of the things regarding Virgo that I kind of been latching onto lately, I'm always looking for right? And in part, it's because of my fascination with Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. But my understanding is that what I just read in a book was that was actually one of the original names for Earth, which I think is kind of interesting. So Earth, and when you look up the etymology of there's like this original sort of primordial kind of thing that comes with it. And so,
ooh, dude, keep going. Sorry, I just had to react.
Go for it, dude. I got notes right here.
Okay, sorry, man.
No worries.
Only because we're getting in super deep into this underworld mythology. Does anyone remember Plato's story of the account of air, where this is the account of where the Greeks, or at least the philosophers that Plato was drawing from, they always pulled from this story of dying in a battle. I think he got like a blow to the head, he got like a bloodless wound, but they thought he was dead and threw him on a funeral pyre. He was about to die. And the whole time he was having some type of out-of-body experience, DMT trip, and he awoke at the last second on the funeral pyre. So he told what he saw in the underworld, in the passage between lives. He was given a glimpse into the passage between lives, and he saw the three fates, weaving there. So this is a great. I love that with the air. One more thing, Ursa is often associated with a bear, and Virgo. If you start using some German pronunciations, Virgo rules working, right? Well, let's say worker with a German accent, Werker. But also, if you say that V, like a Spaniard would, beer, it's the bear. It's the bear. So Virgo, I find, is either the deer or the bear in terms of animals that it's associated with.
Dude,
is it
I'm
dearly beloved? Then you have Libra, who you marry after dear Libra.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to your point, the fertility thing, bearing children, stuff like that, but also Ursa Major, and Ursa Minor, the great bear and little bear. It's not just any great bear; it's a mother bear. And so, with all of the signs, man, I just have to say, and all of the tarot cards, the northern correspondence stuff for me, which this isn't the point of today's chat or whatever, but I see so much northern correspondence with pretty much everything that I look into now. It's shifted my focus in a lot of ways. And that could be worth a conversation, just in and of itself sometime. But so Virgo, the queen of Earth. So again, Earth, Virgo, all that kind of stuff. You were talking about Hermes, and I was thinking about the caduceus. And sometimes Virgo is actually seen holding a caduceus as well. And in a couple of my reference books, it's mentioned the hermits of Hermes having this ritual masturbation sort of practice. And actually, if there's a sign, in my opinion, that's kind of associated with masturbation, I think it might be Virgo. I think you can make the case Virgo. I think you can make the case Scorpio. But I think you're going to kind of see it here. And there's this idea that before the gods had sex, they masturbated life into existence. And this is partly some of the fleur-de-lis symbolism that I've kind of decoded over time and how it associates with her and everything else. Because, again, she had a child the symbolism or the deep decode is that she bears children, or at least bore one child, a solar child generally, without the assistance of a partner. But one of the things that I've kind of picked up, almost kind of reading between the lines in a way, that it potentially might have something to do with this self-gratification sort of experience or whatever, that this may have been a sort of catalyst for her to have a child, which it's kind of up to, I mean, it's up for debate, in my opinion. This is called, I'm forgetting the name. There's a name for the animals that are able to reproduce on their own, you know, and this is a thing amongst certain reptiles and birds and things like that. And there's some occultists who believe that this is actually something that is possible lying dormant within women as well. So that's another rabbit hole just kind of in and of itself. But whenever Virgo season comes around, the Virgin, I always think about this possibility.
Is it parthenogenesis?
Parthenogenesis. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I made a video about Virgo symbolism relating to parthenogenesis a year or two ago, if people are interested. So that's definitely a thing. And then also, I wanted to mention this the veil symbolism once again with woman, with the female, the feminine.
We got a great comment here.
Exactly.
That I had to pick out.
Yes.
Is this something you were going to incorporate?
Well, it's something that I've put in videos before. But yeah, go for it.
Tremendous. I just wanted to link this to autumn, fall. Libra is the beginning, the master. And by the way, Virgo is often considered to be a sign of mastery rather than talent. You know, some signs are talent oriented, meaning one skill might dominate their life. Virgo, being the best student, tends to be very well balanced, you know, very well rounded in terms of education. But you'll find that Virgos are often masters. If they become great at something, it's because they've mastered something. They earn what they get, or they earn what they have. But so Atum, who was a bit of a masturbator, we can say, autumn comes from Atum. Wow. So
I had not made that correspondence with autumn. That's really fascinating. So this obviously implies this return to self, which to me, the underworld symbolism and a lot of the symbolism related to Virgo is all about the return to self, which we'll get into in just a moment with the Hermit card. But the last thing I'll say regarding Virgo and veil symbolism is the fact that the hymen is also a veil. And so it conceals and reveals. And so when a woman has sex for the first time, or obviously there's other ways the hymen can be broken, but you are kind of breaking the seal, right, symbolically. So you're piercing the veil, if you will, and that's what we're going through with this fall sort of cycle. And a lot of people consider Scorpio to be the time where the veil is the thinnest, which is why we have like Halloween and Day of the Dead, you know, during this time of year. And so it's like the outward expression of this piercing of the veil sort of thing, where people dress up like the dead and things like that. And people honor their ancestors and try to have communication, you know, with people, you know, who came before them and everything else. So the hymen is a veil. And then also I would say pubic hair too, the bush, is also a symbolic veil as well. And then hair also is a veil. And so hair symbolism, dude, there's so much to say. I think you were just talking about it on Astro Chads, how it relates to Leo the lion. 100% that mane, you can't deny it. There's a few storylines related to hair symbolism that have like basically Leo qualities baked right into it. I'm thinking of Samson, you know, from the Bible. And so he had his hair cut off, and they thought that that was going to weaken him, and it did not. And he wrestles with a lion and things like that. But I would say hair symbolism is definitely related to Virgo as well. In fact, she's right next to a constellation called Coma Berenices, which is literally a head of hair. And so depending on the sky map you're looking at, it's either going to be a head of hair, or sometimes there's nothing there. It's actually a void. There's something weird going on with this constellation. And then sometimes she's also pointing to that portion of the night sky, and there's nothing there. And so I'm not sure if you looked into this constellation at all, but it has a really interesting sort of storyline, and there's some parallel things going on with that and Virgo. Before it was called Coma Berenices and was a clump of hair, it actually depicted a queen on a throne, and she's holding her child in the palm of her hand. And so I think that's an interesting sort of thing as well, but I don't have any imagery here that's related to that. But if people want to do a deep dive on Virgo symbolism, Coma Berenices bears fruit for sure.
Is that where we get the word comb, to comb your hair?
Ooh, perhaps. That's interesting. Right, so we can move on to the Hermit card, unless you had any other thoughts here.
No.
Right, so the Hermit card is the card that corresponds with Virgo. And as we've been talking about, there is this inner sort of withdrawn sort of thing that, to me, lines up with Virgo symbolism and Virgo season, this verge sort of thing, right? And I would say like threshold comes to mind as well. And inner journeying comes to mind. But here you have the Hermit, and he generally is seen with a staff. There's always mercurial symbolism that he's associated with. Some of the tarot cards that I have for the Hermit, literally his staff is like an elongated caduceus with serpents winding up it and things like that. He's always holding a lantern generally, and he's always very upright. So to me, there's always this sort of phallic kind of thing going on here. So we're talking about the earth, the soil, what penetrates the earth, right? What inseminates a woman, right? It's phallic energy. It's something that needs to burrow within the earth, right? And so it's not uncommon actually for the Hermit card to have like a mushroom cap even. I've seen that in older decks. And so again, relating to this phallic sort of nature, phallic symbolism. And then even in the Thoth deck, you can see that he has a sperm cell on the left-hand side of the card, right? And there's a little homunculus sort of miniature man kind of thing right there in the head. But go ahead.
What else do we call a hermit? Often synonymous with a wizard who might be doing a lot of whizzing, right? As I like to say, the knowledge of water, as some say, right? The memory of water, to be a wizard, wisdom. But a hooded wizard is even more phallic, because if, all circumcision aside, the hood is just as phallic originally as the mushroom and tip symbolism is, for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. Well, I would say, you brought it up, but the hood, foreskin, I believe, is kind of a veil as well. The veil symbolism relates to that for sure.
This ain't the Dr. Longo show for nothing, y'all. Okay, we're talking about schlongs.
It has to come up, dude. Also, it's interesting, I think, in the Thoth deck, I don't know if you've ever considered this. It seems like you said earlier before we went live that the Thoth deck is the tarot deck maybe that you kind of resonate maybe more with or maybe more familiar with. One of the things here is that I believe what they were trying to do is they were trying to create a subliminal tongue out of the Hermit. And so to me, that looks just like this big old kind of tongue, which would be like the phallic portion of your mouth, I would say, And so I think that maybe this is partly what they're trying to get at here. You can see that he's searching at night. That's usually the setup. And there's wheat that's being parted. I can't believe I didn't say this, but Virgo is the harvest maiden. So she's a grain goddess. So this is why she relates to harvest season and all this other stuff. And there's a lot of stuff you could say about just wheat in general and wheat symbolism, but you have the wheat parting, right? And then where it's parting, you see an Orphic egg. So you see an egg with a serpent around it. And so to me, this is basically showing the Hermit having an external journey, but symbolically, as it pertains to us, it's related to the inner journey, the journey within. I would say to your sacred center or your authentic self, if you will. There's a million different ways to kind of describe it. The still point within, perhaps. But he's going deeper within. He's kind of, he wants to unveil what's been concealed to him all of these years. And the Hebrew letter that corresponds with the Hermit card is Yod or Yud, which is essentially like it looks like a little flame, which I think is interesting because he's holding that lantern. But Yud means hand. And so I think it's interesting that in the Thoth deck, the hand is almost like right in the middle of the canvas. It looks deliberately so, like it was done this way, right?
Now, Virgo rules bread and grain and harvest, but also at the end of the day, bakering. Now, this is where we get the word mit, oven mitt, hermit, right? And you're just talking about the hands. Virgo, Gemini rules the hands, but through Mercury, listen, right, with your hands, and that's it.
So you broke up for a brief second. Can you just repeat the last like sentence, literally?
Sorry, well, I was saying Hermit rules bread, baking, harvest, things like that. Grain, Virgo rules education. So it rules grain and the growing of the brain. Grain.
Ah.
Okay, wheat power, right? Wheat power. And then you have, because it rules bread and dealing with grains, this is where we get the mitt, the oven mitt, Hermit, from Virgo. So the oven mitt, dealing with
nice.
bread. And, yeah.
I like that, dude. That's great. Baking for sure. I hadn't considered that, but I mean, that makes a ton of sense given everything. So the other thing related to hands here is the fact that I mentioned earlier that Virgo is seen holding a palm branch, right? So the palm tree very much relates to the hand. Some palm trees basically look like there's like fingers coming out of the trunk, right? And so some palm trees were looked at as basically being like the world tree essentially for that culture, you know. And then also palm is an anagram for lamp as well. And here we have the hermit holding that lamp with his hand. And so there's a lot of sneaky hand, lamp, palm stuff going on here for sure. And then I was just talking about masturbation. So there's all of that as well. But one new thing, though, that I'm very interested in, and I'd love to hear your take on this, is the more I studied this card, I would say I kind of came to the conclusion that I think I understand the hermit in a sort of broader context, right? So he generally is seen as an elder person. He has that big beard, the white beard, which I've heard very much relates to fertility as well, and has related to fertility in like older works of art and stuff. You'll see a guy like holding his beard sort of thing. And so I think that's kind of curious. But I think basically that the hermit is an elder shepherd. And I think that he actually was like a good shepherd, you know, in his former life. And so to me, this explains a few things. It explains perhaps how he's dressed. And then it also explains the staff that he's holding. And then also there's an expression of Mercury, essentially, that is the good shepherd as well. And so if you want to go to the next slide, you'll see what I'm talking about, I think.
Well, Mercury rules audio and hearing. So shepherd to herd.
Oh.
I heard you, you know, audio,
Nice.
Odin. But
Yeah, totally. Right. Okay. So here you have, and this is just a modern painting of Jesus on the left. So I'm not claiming that this is super old or whatever, but you can see the correspondence that I'm kind of making, right? Already. He has that hood on. He has that staff. This is his expression as a good shepherd. And so the symbolism is that he leads his flock, right, to, I don't know, salvation or greener pastures or whatever. But the larger symbolism is that he's a psychopomp, actually. And my understanding is that Christ, earlier on, was more of a mercurial figure and identified as such, and then over the ages became more of a solar figure and was more so associated with the sun. And so you see that on the right-hand side, Christ is the good shepherd. What is he doing? He's holding a lamb on his shoulders. And notice that he has a hunchback from doing this, right? So is that why the hermit is actually hunched over like that from a lifetime of carrying these lambs on his back? And so I think that's very, very curious. And so I'm starting to see these things kind of come to light. And that's where my head is at right now with the Hermit card, potentially being a shepherd in his earlier life there.
Right. You also touched on the age of Pisces is where we get a lot of our Christ symbolism, because Pisces rules crying. So Christ, right? He's a little bit of a crybaby. Turn the cheek, right? Pisces are like this. But also, you bring up a good point. Messiah means messenger. It's the same word. And Mercury is the messenger. So Mercury, in a sense, is the Messiah. But what does that have to do with Pisces? Well, the Messiah was killed or dethroned, fallen in Pisces. Mercury falls in Pisces, if I'm not mistaken, and is hindered in Pisces. Yeah. So Mercury.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, and there's also I think we talked about this briefly one of the times we chatted, but Virgo being on the opposite end of Pisces, and the Virgo glyph literally having that ichthys fish or the Jesus fish embedded within the M, kind of being symbolic of her child, right? So the Virgin Mary and Christ, as you were saying, Piscean symbolism obviously lines up. So the Virgo Pisces correspondence with that fish is very interesting. And then if
remember you said on the Virgo M that the tail coming back through the Virgo M might actually represent the fishtail being across from Virgo. I think it was you who said that.
Yeah. Totally. Exactly right. So then if you move on to the next slide, you'll see that this is his name is Hermes Creophoros. And so this is an expression of Hermes as this good shepherd, once again holding that lamb on his shoulders. So that's kind of my newest take, I guess, on the Hermit card. The other thing I'll say is the number 9 sort of correspondence is fascinating. Are you aware of the 9 mathematical properties with adding 9 and reducing 9 and it always coming back to 9? We may have talked about it too at some point.
Yeah, it's the most fractal number by far.
Yeah.
It's the most fractal digit.
Totally. So as an example, 9 plus 9, 18, 1 plus 8 is 9, half of 9, 4.5, 4 plus 5 is 9. So either which way you go, it's going to reduce back down to 9. So again, this return to self sort of thing. And I very much see that as the fall as well in this underworld kind of symbolism. So yeah, there you have it with Virgo stuff.
Libra.
And now we have Libra. We've got the scales. So let me see here. Okay. Well, as I was saying earlier, potentially Libra was introduced at some point, breaking up this huge sign. So let me ask you this real quick. Is that your understanding as well? Is that what you've heard regarding Libra being like a later edition, or have you heard different sorts of things? I'm not committed either which way. I don't know what really happened, but I'm just kind of curious what you think.
I don't know if I've ever heard anything and taken it to heart. I know that there's 12. There always has been. There always will be. There can't not be 12. So people might have renamed it. They might have came up with a new symbol, like it became more popular than the old one. But to me, there's always been 12. There always will be. And Libra would not have been a sign that would have been forgotten about, because this is the fall time. It's the other equinox. And for me, I think it's a sign. It's a sign that, due to the symbolism, like I said at the beginning, that people wanted to forget about, so that it might have been glossed. That's to me why it was glossed over, especially in medieval times, is they didn't want to delve with the Adam and Eve, fall of man, fruit, sexuality, deception, all that. it's a whole can of worms. So I think they kind of glossed over it and went Virgo to Scorpio. But to me, you can't take out any sign of the zodiac. There's always 12 spokes of the wheel.
Hmm.
And you can't have 10 notes in a musical scale. You can't have,
I see.
10 hands on a clock. 13 lunar cycle, that's something else. You can have 13. That's a separate cycle. That's lunar, not solar. But within the solar zodiac, there's 12. There has to be 12. The clock, notes in a scale. But so I think people saying that it was added, I think they just kind of hashed things out after the symbolism wasn't so touchy anymore.
I see. I gotcha. Yeah. No, I mean, 12 being a solar number, that's the case all day long. I really like, actually, you said this at some point, maybe you've repeated it multiple times, but I think you said something along the lines of like the zodiac, the signs of astrology represents the 12ness of like this reality or this experience or something along those lines. You remember saying that?
Yeah, people always say, "Oh, what about the 13th zodiac sign?" Well, I'll stop you right there. You can't. That sentence can't exist. Zodiac means 2 plus 10. Zodiac. So is 2. So 2, many languages, T becomes a Z. And in German, for example, and Zodia, dia is 10. Yes. So 2 plus 10. There's 2 types of languages in the world. Languages that count to 10 and then repeat, or languages that count to 12 and then repeat. Make sense? In their digits, not for example, we don't say 10 plus 1, we say 11. We don't say 10 plus 2, we say 12. Many
Right.
languages, however, start saying 10 plus 1, 10 plus 2. But
Gotcha.
that's it.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because otherwise it's almost like it would be a different system, right? So relating to other things or whatever. But when you said that, the 12ness of things, I think maybe you've said that with other things before too, but that resonated for sure. So Libra, obviously the scales, this is the only sign that's like not an animal or a person, right? So there's a lot to be said about that. It's more mechanical. So to me, what this kind of relates to is it being impartial, actually. And so if you're going to hand out judgments, and if something's going to balance and tell you what it weighs, you want it to be impartial. And so to me, that's kind of what's being said here. It's interesting that there are illustrations that heavily relate the scales and the claws of Scorpio together. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the scales, the 2 pans, are sometimes referred to as the northern and southern claws. So this is kind of like an old throwback to the fact that the claws of Scorpio sometimes are related to these pans. And I have some images here that literally show the claws literally resting in the pans.
So Saturn rules contracts. Saturn exalts in Libra. Saturn is Santa Claus. We get claws from Saturn. And Saturn exalts in Libra. So yes, contracts and clauses. And yes, which also is another thing about deception with Libra, showing one thing but having another. The marriage, the mirage. Clauses are often those. Did you read the fine text? Also fine text. Libra rules reading, but also what is fine. Fine goods, fine antiques, fine women. Curvy, beautiful. Libra rules that type of stuff. So
Right. Awesome, dude. One of the things I've kind of been thinking about lately too is the fact that we have these 12 signs. It's worth acknowledging the polarity signs, the signs that sit opposite each other on the ecliptic, right? It's also kind of worth acknowledging, but it's worth acknowledging the transition between signs and the kind of liminal space or almost like the symbolic quality that exists between each sign. And so between each sign, to me, it almost seems like there's not necessarily separate mythology, but there's symbolism that is specifically related to each sign and the transition between each sign. So that's something that I'm always looking out for, which is why I brought up the Scorpio thing. And so again, we'll look at imagery that kind of relates to that.
Can I hit you with? Sorry,
please, dude. Of course,
can
man.
I hit you with one? You got me good on the. What did you say about Virgo to Libra? You said sentence you said earlier.
I can't remember. It'll come to you though.
There was something about Virgo and bearing this or bearing something.
A bear, and then Ursa Major stuff I brought up with that, bearing children.
It was something with Virgo to Libra where the sentence showed one sign to the other, but I wanted to give one that was Libra to Scorpio. Scorpio rules revenge, right? Right. Libra rules arrangements, things like that. This is where we get even the score. Even is Libra, the evening. It rules sunset, but it is also autumn, the fall, when the sun is setting in the larger grand sense. It's setting in over a large period of time. Well, you also get your evening, the score. Some comes from Scorpio, the most competitive. Hey, I scored last night. You know, you were scorpionic with somebody, and evening, keeping tabs, balance. Okay, you guys get it.
Yeah, no, dude, that's a good point. One of the things I was going to bring up is the sk sound with a lot of scorpionic words. So you said score, because I think of scoring too, like you would score like in clay or something like that or whatever. And then also you would etch something in, right? But then also skull, right? And then I think of scrape. And then here we have scales as well, right?
Ooh.
And then having this relationship with Scorpio. So that's something that I've noticed before. I don't think I have like a list in front of me or anything like that, but
Well, Mario, I just happen to have a list in front of me because this is like all I do all day. But I've got one here of Scorpio. You will find Scorpio rules disgusting things. So there's one right there, disgust. And this is why we have Halloween being in Scorpio at the cusp between Libra to Scorpio. You have your days of the dead and things like that. Halloween, Scorpio rules the wiener. If you go into an underground area, that's hollow. So Halloween, right? And if we go to Scorpio, some of the astro-etymology of Scorpio, you'll find little to no flattering words with the ska beginning prefix. This is because Scorpio is mythologically, we're not saying Scorpios are bad. They're deep. They make great thinkers, many geniuses, smart detectives, things like that. Great competitive spirits. But Scorpio, mythologically, symbolically, represents a time of darkness, despair, violence, assassination. That's why you have your most famous assassination ever, perhaps JFK, assassinated by a sniper on the cusp between assassination and marksmanship. Scorpio and Sagittarius, November 22nd, the assassination of JFK, but ska. So he had his skull blown out, right? But the ska is Scorpio through and through. The only pleasant word with the ska sound, and I've looked hard. Please give me if you guys have them. Is skill. So Scorpios are skilled, very very skilled. But with that, they're competitive, and they're also killers. That's why I say kill is in skill. So it's not even. It's good, but it still has a dark. Well, I'll just quickly go down a list here,
please,
of Scorpio words. And they bend a little bit especially if we put a vowel in between the S and the C. So there's a little bit of a stretch in some of these, but you'll see the SK sound is consistently delivering a same meaning in the English language. Secret, and you'll find, keep in mind, Scorpio has to do with sex, secrets, hidden things, hidden from Hades. Hide, to skin something off, right, to see what's underneath the hide. Secret, secrete, secretary. That's often why secretaries are engaged in those acts with people. Secretary, secrets, secretion, scars. Also,
Yes.
sorry. That's what's sacred to secrets, sacred acts. But scars, scare, scan, like the eagle. They scan, or you look at the why in Scorpio do we find both the eagle and the scorpion? Because the eagle has the expansive vision. The scorpion has the what's the word? The spectral vision. It can see multiple spectrums. I think the scorpion can see the most spectrums of light visibly, just walking around. I think that's
Wow.
the case. So these both rule extreme degrees of not just sight, but the ability to scour, which comes from Scorpio as well. So scour, scan, scandal, to be scantily, if you're scantily clothed, to scooter, to move quickly. You'll find Scorpio's a quick moving sign too. The peregrine falcon is the fastest moving animal we know of, I think. And falcon comes from Vulcan, which is a scorpionic associated deity, you have score, like I said, competition, scourge, to destroy, leave nothing in your wake, scourge, scorn, to let someone know how terrible you feel, scoundrel, scour, scout. What comes right before? Okay, you have the sniper, the marksman in Sagittarius. What comes right before the sniper? The scout. The scout is positioning the shots for the sniper side, right to his left with the scouting scope. And he's telling the marksman. So Scorpio going into Sagittarius, we have the scout going into the sniper. Scraps, scry, to go deep, to see deep into the underworld, to scry. That's a combination of Scorpio and Pisces, going very deep. Scry. Skate, skank. If you're skating, you might be doing a lot of grinding, right? But skate, skank, skeet, sketch, something sketchy. Yeah, scorpionic. You don't want to be in that part of town. So, drugs and violence and sex, Scorpio. Skeet, sketchy, and skunk. Something that is very off-putting, skunk. Or, so just the ska sound. And I'm going to add that list. But
Dude, that was awesome. I had not ever, occasionally I come across words like this, but obviously you did a deep dive, dude. That was fantastic. Seriously, I love that.
last one is Scorpio rules excretory system. And this is where we get scat. But okay.
Oh. No, that makes sense too. Nice. A couple things I wanted to mention. If people want to do follow-up research on this, I don't have imagery to back this one up, but there are, many different sky maps that have been illustrated over the ages, right? And my understanding is one of my reference books, and I don't think I've ever been able to actually find this illustration, but it was saying that in a Christian sky map that Libra was not looked at as being scales, but it was actually the Tower of Babel, which I thought was really interesting for a few different reasons. And so once again, it's another inanimate object, if you will, taking the place of the scales. And it makes me think of a few things related to words in the Tower of Babel and how everyone's language was scrambled and things like that. But it also reminded me tower symbolism always reminds me of the world axis, right? Or the trunk of the world tree. And so I think world mountain symbolism, world tree symbolism, very much related in so many ways. And it just reminds me of the fact that Ursa Major and Minor, according to at least one period of time in ancient China, was looked at as not being bears, but actually as being jade scales. And so there's this correspondence with that as well, which is something that I kind of think about. One of my favorite things is just to find all of the different correspondences throughout history with Ursa Major and Minor. So they've even been looked at as scales, right? So that's kind of a curious sort of thing. So just thought I would mention those two things. And then if you progress forward here, talking about, you know, etymological stuff, just a few words that, right, correspond with Libra, which we've already discussed, you know, some of these. Libra, library, liberty, liberal, libel, Liber, right? So the book aspect of everything. It's a really, really strong correspondence there with that.
Hey, Aleister Crowley was a Libra too, if I'm not mistaken. And
Oh, is that right?
Crowley was a Libra. That's why he loved calling his books Libers, Libers. But
Oh.
also with libel, we've already said that Libra rules lying because it's deception, the fall of man, Eve being deceived by the serpent. Well, what did Crowley? One of my favorite Crowley quotes. He was a Libra, so we'll take his word on it. There is love, and then Libra rules love, by the way, like romantic partnership, marriage. Crowley said, there is love and there is love. There is the serpent and there is the dove. These are the two animals I see associated with Libra. Because you're right, it is the only symbol not associated with a direct, like mammal or humanoid or a bird. Or fish, sorry, what would I say? Vertebrate, not associated with a vertebrate, but the air signs all tend to be associated with humans as well in humanism. So you have Gemini, the twins, Libra, the Lady Justice, and Aquarius, the angel or the water holder. Also, libel is to hurt someone's image publicly. That's where libel differs from lie. Libel is, So then you have libertine. Anyone who knows Libras or has got to know Libras aged 18 to 25 knows they're perhaps the most libertine. It's not even promiscuity. It's not like the sex thing. It really is just this obsession with socialization and letting loose. And libertine implies like a sexuality, but it's a little bit more than that. They just let loose, and loose comes from Lucifer. So Libra is Lucifer, the light bringer. Libra.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, the planetary correspondence is Libra, right? And there are people, whether this is where you're at or not or whatever, but there is a lot of material out there about Venus being related to Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star, evening star sort of thing. And so, and then the love business that you were just talking about right now. So that Venusian sort of quality. It's also perhaps worth pointing out too, I think it's really interesting that Mercury and Venus both correspond with two different signs. And in each case, they're right next to each other. So Virgo with Mercury, followed by Libra, Venus, and then also Taurus with Venus, and then Gemini with Mercury.
Right. So everyone understands. He's saying you have Taurus, then Gemini. That's Venus, and then Mercury, ruling those respectively. Then you have Virgo and Libra, also. Well, not the same order, but Gemini. Mercury, then Venus, ruling those. So side by side in both instances.
Indeed. And also something that I think is really interesting too, would love to know what you think, is the fact that the Venus glyph is a circle with a cross right underneath. And then the Mercury glyph is the exact same glyph, but you just add horns. And so it's been said that Mercury may be the true consort of Venus, the true partner of Venus. And when you just look at the glyphs, you can kind of see where they're going at with it. And then when you look at the signs that they're both associated with, they're always right there as a pair. So is that something you've ever considered or looked into by chance?
Yes.
Right?
All right. Yes. Oh, yeah.
So to me, it makes a lot of sense, and I feel more mercurial in nature than anything else. So I feel like, I don't know, I identify with that personally. Right. So let's see here. What do we have? Oh, well, I was going to say, actually, let's just move on. We can move on to the next slide there. Right. So the card that corresponds with Libra here is Adjustment or Justice. And you'll notice that the numbers have switched here. In Crowley, it's number 8. In the Rider-Waite, it's number 11. You actually asked me about this like a month or two ago or a few months ago or something, like what's up with the switch, I believe. And I've intended to reread, which I've done many times, what the deal is with that, and I haven't. But suffice it to say, they're essentially the same card here. And so you have an expression of Lady Justice, basically. And you see that the two pillars are very strong right there with the Justice card on the right. And there's kind of two sets of pillars with the Adjustment card on the left-hand side. I could see the correspondence between the number 8 with Libra as well, especially, I think of like October, Octo, 8, to me that kind of lines up there. And then she's holding...
Give me 1 second. Keep
No
going.
worries.
I'm just going to step out for a second. Keep going.
Yeah. You're all good. So the main thing here, though, is this balancing sort of concept. So you can see that on the left-hand side, literally, she is the balance herself. So she's balancing on this point. So she's balancing on the tip of the sword. And you can see that her feet are actually right there at the tip. And it looks like a really small detail, but there's actually a lot to say in regards to how this is being sort of expressed. And then you'll also notice on the right-hand side, there's barely the tip of the right foot being exposed from that robe there, right? Well, this very much reminds me of a lot of older Venus statues or Venus figurines, right? So I don't have one here for you guys, but you guys have probably seen it. It's a very bulby woman, and she has big breasts, a larger belly, and literally you'll notice that her legs and her feet taper down to a point, right? This is not an accident. And so you see here that you see a very similar thing going on. Also in the Thoth deck, the Magician card, he's balancing on one foot as well. And so my personal opinion is that it relates back to the world axis. So tapered feet, one-legged symbolism, standing on one foot, twirling around on one foot, twirling around on your tippy toe sort of thing. It's symbolic of the world axis because the world axis is the cosmic axle. It's the point in which the stars revolve around. So Polaris would be that central star that everything kind of revolves around. And so Crowley has even written about adjustment or balance and relating it to the spinning of a top or like a spinning wheel sort of thing. He kind of breaks it out of the paradigm of like a teeter-totter, left and right, going up and down, but more so the balance of spin, right? The balance of that kind of movement, keeping some sort of equilibrium.
I wanted to bring up that Justice, Lady Justice, is virtually synonymous with or the same deity, same person as Lady Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And Liberty we find from Libra, as you just showed in the last slide. But I want to show also that liberty and freedom are synonymous, largely. So we get liberty from Libra, but we get and if you're loose, that comes from Lucifer. So if you let loose, you're free, that comes from Lucifer. If you have liberty, that comes from Libra. So those are the same word. And then you have, because Lucifer means light bringer, Libra, bring the light, Bra, Li, light, okay?
Mm.
And then you have freedom is from Freya. It's from Freya. So Freya is just the Norse way of saying Lucifer or saying Lady Liberty. So free, to be free. And that's it.
Well, that makes perfect sense, dude. Freya's day being Friday, the day of Venus. So just everything just kind of coming back around to that. One thing I've heard, I don't know if your understanding is the same, but actually this relates to Bach Saga stuff, I believe, right? In that I've heard that the reason why it's Lady Liberty, Lady Justice is because women get to dictate who they couple with and have children with. So they are the judges of man. Literally the judges of man. And isn't that part of the Bach Saga thing, is that the women would judge these men to see who they're actually most compatible with, who they actually want to produce children with? You're muted there.
Sorry, the women would get to pick. Also, with the etymology of tying this back into the serpent obviously has to do with fertility as well. But fertility we get from Freya as well. Aphrodite. The fra can become a fur in different languages. But with fertility and the serpent, why, back to that Aleister Crowley, why is Libra both lying and love? Deception, the serpent, but love via the dove? Because Libra is the 7th month of the year. 7th sign.
Yes.
7th sign, September, October. So that's, by the way, guys, if you want to know why October, September, December got all messed up, astrology. It's not the Roman emperors, it's astrology. So what you have also is sept. Sept is where we get serpent. So serpentine means the 7th. If something is the 7th, Libra is the 7th sign. So sept, to be, usurped,
absolutely,
whatever, sept, serpent.
Totally. There's a huge correspondence as well with Sept, 7, and Set as well. The Egyptian god Set, for sure.
Yes.
Related to some of the Crowley stuff you've brought up as well, by the way, I didn't include it, but excuse me, the Book of the Law and some of Crowley's material has Egyptian artwork on the cover, and it's not uncommon for him to have a pillar with the feather of Ma'at on it as well. And that's actually what you see on the headdress of the Crowley version of the card, is the feather of Ma'at. And so this is the same feather that your heart would be weighed against in the weighing of the soul's ritual. So the scales play a part in all of that, right? So psychostasis, I think, is the name for this ritual as well. And I don't think that they were the only ones that kind of had this sort of idea of weighing your heart against this feather. And if your heart was heavy, essentially your heart or soul or whatever was devoured by some monster. And then if it was lighter than the feather, then it meant that you were going to have a favorable transition in the afterlife. So that's something that I've mentioned before in some of my Libra videos as well. And I actually have an image of that in a couple of slides here. But to me also, it's worth kind of noting, especially in the Rider-Waite version, these two pillars. So it's pretty much indicating that this figure here is like the middle way or the middle pillar, the first pillar or the third pillar, depending on how you look at it. And so the true sort of equilibrium in this whole entire setup, right? And if you look at a Kabbalistic tree of life, there's going to be two pillars that are essentially highlighted and discussed more than the middle one, but there is a central pillar, and the sephiroths on that tree of life extend above and below the other two pillars. So to me, this is like a point of transcendence, or the pillar of transcendence, or whatever you want to say. I very much relate it to like a stairway to heaven sort of idea, or Jacob's ladder, or whatever you want to say. There's lots of different ideas about, what happens to us, upon death. I see a huge northern correspondence with that, going to the northern sky. Just like it was said in the Bach saga, right? Your soul flies to the north upon death, or something along those lines. So there's all of that. And we can move on here unless you had something else to say. There you go. So Libra literally being a unit of weight. So we don't have to read the article or at least even the intro or whatever. But this is where we get literally pound from. Pound came from Libra. The LB came from Libra. Libra pondo is a weight of measurement, a unit of weight. And so I think that's all very interesting, because obviously we're dealing with the scales here. So then it kind of makes sense that this weight aspect would later on be attributed to actual currency. So if you cruise on to the next slide, we start getting into the pound, and how you have the British pound, and there's other countries that use the pound. And when you look at literally the glyph that they use for the pound, it's an expression of Libra. It looks like an L. So I don't know if my screen is up to date or whatever, but on that next slide, you're going to see a pound note. There you go. So there's that L. So indicative of Libra for sure. That's its roots right there. And then the next slide there is the weighing of the souls. So you see the feather right there. So the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. So Ma'at very much relates to this idea of balance or equilibrium, justice, a lot of the themes that we're already talking about. And then this ritual literally very much related to the underworld. You have Anubis right there, right? An underworld sort of figure. And so I see a huge correspondence with some Libra symbolism and this weighing of the souls ritual.
There you got the yoke.
Yep, that's the yoke. So I have to say, this to me is really fascinating. So if you turn that yoke upside down, it kind of looks like a Libra glyph, right? And so that's what some people have said. And so here we are talking about Libra ruled by Venus, right? And we're talking about the yoke. And a lot of the times it's referred to as an ox yoke, right? And an ox is a castrated bull. It's interesting that the other sign associated with Venus is Taurus, right? The bull. And so that's kind of a curious sort of thing, this potential connection here with the ox yoke. And then even you're talking about the shackles and everything else. This is, very much in line with that, I would say. There you go. So as we transition from Libra to Scorpio, I wanted to bring up the idea that its claws have been associated with the pans. And so here's just one illustration showing you, obviously just the relationship between the two right there. And then the next two images show you in more detail. Right. So here in this version, literally the claws are within the pans of Libra itself. So the northern and southern claws. And there you go. Just another image to look at there with the claws kind of embracing those two pans. And so, I generally, when I think of Scorpio, I do kind of consider that. Okay, so Scorpio here, we were talking about it earlier. If you look at Scorpio in the night sky without the image here, it does look very bird-like as well. And so this is related to this phoenix sort of idea. And we already mentioned too, right? The scorpion, the serpent, and then the phoenix being like the three aspects of Scorpio. And so it's just worth noting the bird-like sort of quality. And then when you think about the phoenix itself and phoenix symbolism and what that's all about, rising from the ashes and transmutations and, stuff like that, transformation, it makes a lot of sense that it would be associated with Scorpio. And so Scorpio has been looked at as actually being like an occult initiation sort of sign. So when you enter into a fraternity or whatever, you know, usually, and even folk traditions have this too, that a symbolic death leading to a symbolic rebirth, essentially. So that's very much in line with Scorpionic tradition, I would say.
Also, with the phoenix, where we get the word fiend, right? And the phoenix needs to score Scorpio. So the phoenix also, Scorpio rules nicks, cuts, scrapes, the drawing of blood.
Right.
So,
definitely.
yeah.
So one of the things I'll say too, just about the nature of the scorpion, because I don't know if I have too many images actually in this slideshow with the scorpion, but it is fit for battle. You know, we have scorpions where we live, and so I've had a chance to kind of study them more closely over the last few years than in previous times in my life. And it's amazing just kind of seeing their ways and seeing their armor. They always, obviously, they're always shielded, they're always guarded, they're always ready to fight. They've got built-in weapons, not only with the claws, but also obviously with its stinger. And one of the things that I find fascinating, which we've talked about this briefly too before, but the fact that this the stinger can be used against self as well. So I've put videos of recordings of people literally showing a scorpion that is trapped and then them stinging themselves to death. So if you look into, and I don't understand what's going on here, but if you look into mainstream sources, you're not going to find any acknowledgement that the scorpion can commit suicide. They always chalk it up to urban legend. But yet in my occult material, it's mentioned multiple times that scorpions can sting themselves. Curiously enough, what's always said is that if they're surrounded in a ring of fire, they will commit suicide, which I'm like, why is this always the reference? And who does this, you know? But that's always the reference, is a scorpion being surrounded by fire. If they feel the pressure, and maybe, I don't know if this is part of the personality side of astrology, you can tell me, but when the pressure's on, they can basically crumble underneath that pressure, and they will choose to actually kill themselves instead of actually having to face whatever's, you know, coming to them or whatever. So to me, that's very interesting that this would even be the case. And then the fire thing is kind of curious too, because the older planetary correspondence with Scorpio is with Mars. The updated correspondence is with Pluto. So obviously Mars being very fiery in nature and things like that, I think made a lot of sense.
Well, you know, people say old versus new, but they're one and the same, because the visible planets, the old, they're not old. They're just visible to the naked eye. Whereas the non-visible planets to the naked eye, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and the other asteroids, those are in their own class. But with Mars, it wasn't replaced by Pluto. It is Pluto. Mars evolved. If you think about an evolved Pokemon or your octave in music, they are the same pitch, Mars and Pluto. They're both gods of war. But Pluto is to the extreme degree, to the next octave, the next level, evolved, so to speak. And Neptune we get from Venus. Venus rules music, but Neptune's where we get tunes. So, then you have Uranus is the octave of Mercury. Mercury rules innovation and education and techniques and things like that, sciences, and then Uranus rules that to the extreme. X-ray, radio messaging and communication of over long extreme distances and instant communication. So they're I like to think of them as octaves of the planets.
Nice. To be honest, dude, I like the way you're able to explain it, because I feel like I've either been stubborn or dense or whatever, but like when I first started studying this material, it was about the traditional planetary system, the visible planets, you know, and I kind of stuck with that. And for whatever reason, the number 7 is this nice sort of number for me and corresponds with so many like incredible things. And so for a long time, I've struggled with the invisible planets, and I acknowledge them to like a certain degree, but I feel like my foundation has always been with the traditional 7. But as I've heard you talk about it, it's giving me kind of a new appreciation and perspective with them. And so I like the way you kind of frame all of this. So it's appreciated.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. It's that's the main takeaway is they don't replace the visible planets. They are the visible planets with more specified applications, more extreme. And another thing is that the unvisible planets are especially geared towards human affairs, meaning they don't rule much with the natural world, because they don't cast light onto the earth. They can only be observed typically by extraordinary external means, either a telescope, or you have to wait to see one of these bodies pass in front of something else that is more luminous in order to know that it's actually there. So they do exist. It's not just NASA that shows them to us. Pluto, Neptune, these places do exist. You can see them pass in front of other bodies. That's how we know they exist sometimes. But also planet. Hey guys, if you're flat Earth and you don't like the word planet, you can suck my balls. You can suck my nuts. Planet does not mean ball. Okay, it does not. Planet means wanderer. That's it. That's it. If you're a little flat Earth trigger, oh, did I use your trigger word, little flat Earth baby? Do I need to tuck you into bed? Did we say your little trigger word, planet? Okay. Sorry, Mario, not to bother you with this, but
Oh, you're good, dude.
I'm so over I'm a flat earther, proudly, unashamedly. Okay. I'm sick of the flat earthers saying, "You said planet, debunked. Oh, got to turn this video off." The most ignorant comments you've ever seen in your life. Okay. Oh, I was loving this video until he said the word planet.
Right.
So that's
dude, I totally get it. And you know, I don't know if there's so many issues with the phrase or whatever, the combination of words flat earth, that I almost is just like one of these things where I know it gets it has a lot of baggage, essentially, you know. But I'm going to Flattoberfest, so just to kind of let you know where I'm at. You know, there's people who are going that I want to meet, and friends that I've made over the years that are all going to Flattoberfest. So it's in Las Vegas. There's probably people here in the chat that are going, perhaps, you know. So anyway, so I'll be there if people are interested in meeting up or doing something before or afterwards or whatever. But I totally understand where you're coming from, though, for sure. So what was I going to say? It's a fixed sign, right? So it has a brilliant royal star associated with it. Scorpio does. So Antares, right? So it's generally called like the heart of Scorpio. It's really interesting. Opposite Scorpio is Taurus, and its star is Aldebaran, which I've always been fascinated with. But one of the things that people have said over time is that when you're looking at Antares, that you are looking, and I don't even know, dude, you tell me what you think about this, but there's stuff out there where like when you're looking at Antares, you're looking towards the center of the galaxy. And when you're looking towards Aldebaran, you're looking away from the center of the galaxy. So some people have said that these are gates in a way, the Golden Gate and the Silver Gate, which I think is kind of intriguing. You see golden and silver keys being crossed on the Hierophant card, which corresponds with Taurus. And Scorpio, where it's at, it's literally like it intersects with the Milky Way galaxy as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one thing people have said over time.
You have Scorpio cusping into Sagittarius, which we have the word center of the universe, which tends to be the Milky Way. The Milky Way is the center of this galaxy, right? Largely nonsense in my opinion, but regardless, it's there. You can look at it. There's the Milky Way, and the center. The word center comes to us from centaur, the centaur, right? The center of the bullseye, which is the cusp of Scorpio Sagittarius. What do we have directly across from that? The cusp of Taurus and Gemini. That is the bullseye. The bull, Taurus, and the eye, Gemini.
Yeah.
Gem in the eye, right across from. So yeah.
That's right.
I'm sure you know that too.
No, yeah, exactly right. And then even Aldebaran is literally the eye of the bull, right?
Yes.
And then also to your point with Centaur, my understanding is that Centaur goes back to being a bull killer. And so there's that breakdown too. So Centaur, right? So anyways, I think the Royal Star thing is interesting. People can look into the center of the galaxy business if they so choose. I think that's kind of a curious thing. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I have more notes for Scorpio than anything else. I mean, just when I was writing just like stream of consciousness, it's like the Scorpio list was like twice as long as the list for everything else that we're talking about tonight. So there are many depths here. Like there's just a lot to chew on with everything related to the end of or related to the center of the galaxy thing too. There's older myths about a scorpion woman existing at the end of the galaxy, which I think is kind of relating to some of this Milky Way kind of business. And generally when there's a scorpion deity, it's a goddess. But there's also deities that have scorpion tails that are very godlike. So I'll show you a couple of images when we get into Sagittarius related to that. But after this, though, dude, I have some stuff. There you go with the death card. But I need to take a quick bathroom break. So I'll be back in like a minute or so before we dive into the cards here.
You're good, man. I think I'll take a little bathroom break myself.
There you go, man. All right.
Powder my nose.
Sounds good.
See you in a jiff. So what's up, y'all? Pretty bitchin' presentation, huh? You guys just give me a sec here. I'm gonna sip my tea. Okay. Intermission, yeah. Let this intermission be your intermission. of Who's sparking up out there, huh? So, it's demonetized. LOL. Nope. We're going to be doing a good video coming up soon on tobacco. Tobacco. Well, me, people helping me, but tobacco, Tampa Bay, Tocobaga, huge connections. I'm not much of a tobacco guy, but anyone who likes tobacco or smoking is going to love this video showing the possibly true origin of tobacco. Florida, not the Caribbean, not Cuba, not wherever they try and tell us it is. Florida. Everything comes from Florida, guys. If you haven't figured by now, there's no stopping Dr. Longo. He's gonna know, but for real, tobacco, there's actual evidence. I'm not just grabbing everything I can and saying Florida, Florida, Florida. This is some good stuff. And I found it working towards a different video. I uncovered this, so yeah, that's coming soon. But
nice, dude. All right, thanks for that.
Of course.
Cool. So one of the things that's worth mentioning here, because already with the Thoth deck, I'm thinking about it, is the correspondence with the genitals and Scorpio, right? And so on the human body, all of the signs correspond to a different part of it. And Scorpio corresponds with the genitals. Really, really interesting. I'm inclined to think that a lot of folk genital mutilation or circumcision rituals actually align with Scorpio as well. In fact, I can't remember the African tribe, but I can pull it up at some point if you're interested. But the whole deal was that female genital mutilation, cutting off the clit or the tip of it, upon doing so, they would refer to the blood as the venom of a scorpion. And they would refer to the clit as literally a scorpion's stinger as well. So when I read that, I was just kind of blown away, actually, just the symbolic correspondence with everything. And then also, too, it's not uncommon when you look into some of these types of rituals and stuff, circumcision, the blood from circumcision being referred to as menstrual blood as well. And this reminds me of the visible planet correspondence, Mars, right? And the warlike nature of Mars. There's a blood association, things like that. And so I'm reminded of this because here in the Crowley deck, on the left-hand side, you see, you know, this kind of this phallic sort of nature coming from the crotch of this figure here of death, right? And so it almost appears as though... I mean, it looks like a few different things. It looks like he's a harvester of souls, you know? So he has that scythe there, and then you have these lines emanating from its crotch region, and then you have these bubbles being created. And it almost looks like he's weaving together new life or something along these lines, which that's what death does. So when I think of death, I think of birth, you know? And so a symbolic death is a symbolic rebirth, as I was saying earlier. And so death oftentimes is associated with riding a white horse. Here you see him coming in the Rider-Waite version with this flag. Generally has a white rose on it. Very much associated with like funerary symbolism around the world. White roses are definitely a thing at funerals and whatnot. But you could even see, too, there's like a glimmer of optimism in the background. You see these two towers and you see this sunrise, right? Like a new beginning sort of thing. In the Thoth version, you actually see all of the aspects of Scorpio being represented, too. So you see down below, you see the scorpion in the lower right-hand version, and then you see a serpent on the left, and then in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see that phoenix. So this aligns very nicely with the alchemical process of putrefaction, which is generally associated, if I'm not mistaken, with Scorpio. And so it's this blackening sort of process, but it's like it's like the phoenix sort of symbolism, where it's just like this decaying sort of thing so that it can be turned into something else, so it can transmute itself into something else. I think it's fascinating that Crowley decided to put death in what looks like the bottom of the ocean, right? And so just the symbolism of the womb comes to mind, the amniotic fluid, the symbolism of just the deep ocean and how dense it is, and how much pressure is down there, and how it can crush things and everything else. But it also reminds me very much of the underworld sort of aspect that we've been talking about too. And so one of the things that I've kind of picked up over time is that a lot of deities that are kind of considered adversarial or devil-like in nature, to me it seems like some of these figures that are associated, like the devil, with like existing in like an underworld sort of thing, that I think perhaps in previous eras they were more so associated with water and being underwater. So there is a direct sort of correspondence that you can make with the underworld and underwater sort of side of things. And so I think that the trident, right, is kind of one of these symbols where it's like, obviously, you know about the watery associations with that. And then it's not uncommon for the devil to have like a pitchfork sort of thing. And so the underground water side of symbolism to me is just, it's very curious. But here you see it on display, you know, in the death card here. It's the 13th card. One of the associations with this card is that it shall not be named, And that's actually a tradition. If you want to go to the next slide, in a lot of older decks, they did not put the name of death. And this is something that you'll see even literally with the scorpion, that there's some cultures that, if I'm not mistaken, they don't refer to the scorpion by name, and they don't refer to death by name because they fear that they're going to invoke it by naming it and by actually verbalizing it. So that's why you don't see its title there. So it's not even literally written on the card. So that's a very curious sort of thing. And so, go ahead.
The guy who plays Voldemort is not a Scorpio, but he is a Capricorn Scorpio. So he's Capricorn. Here, let me look up his astro. Ralph Fiennes, however you say it.
Mm-hmm.
Fiennes.
Nice. There you go.
Here, let me look that up. Which are the two signs most associated with death?
Right.
It's Capricorn and Scorpio.
Totally. And I was thinking of Capricorn when I brought up the devil or adversarial sort of thing. The devil card corresponds with Capricorn. And isn't it interesting that Capricorn is a sea goat? So there's a watery association, esoterically, even with the devil. Even though we tend to associate it with being underground and being very earthy, I think that there's a watery thing going on there.
Just real quick, this is the Voldemort, guys. He just said the person who can't be named, right? I know this is Harry Potter. I'm not a Harry Potter guy, but Voldemort, he who can't be named, doesn't have a face. The man who plays him is the two darkest signs put together. He's a 0-degree Capricorn and a Scorpio moon. So two dark signs.
Whoa.
That's how you get a villain like that to be authentic.
Definitely. There you go, man. That's interesting for sure. I really, dude, I can't believe it. I'm not a Harry Potter person either, but I've been told many times throughout the years, I really got to check it out. And that it's completely chock full of stuff that I would be into. Right. So I want to break down the potential origin of this card, or at least one of the earlier decks that had an expression of death in it, because I think it's very fascinating. So this is an older Marseille deck, and my understanding is that like the three oldest decks, the Marseille, Visconti Forza, and the Solabusca, I don't think you can actually... What's up, Slick? I don't think you can actually determine which one was first. That's my understanding. Whenever I look into it, it like history like breaks down and it's just very generalized sort of thing. But when you look at this card, there's a lot of interesting things going on. So you have Death, he has his scythe, Harvester of Souls, and you see these two heads down below. It's not uncommon to have kings and queens, and their heads are severed, obviously. So literally they're decapitated, which I think is very fascinating because Scorpio corresponds, as we've been talking about, also with Halloween, and we have the tradition of the jack-o'-lantern. So now whenever I see jack-o'-lanterns, I think of severed heads, and I think of this card. And I'm like, that's really funny that we have a decapitated head sort of ritual, and we're animating, the jack-o'-lantern with a flame. So we're like giving it life for a night, And I think that there's something to be said about this tradition and how it relates to this card. And so it's not uncommon to see like objects of wealth either. So you might see crowns and jewels and jewelry and like all this kind of stuff on the ground, right? So the next card I want to show you is literally in line with the same tradition. This is the Solabusca deck, but it's not obvious that this is the death card. And this is something that I'm fascinated with because there's a lot of cards that associate with modern cards, I guess, or cards that came later on, but they're not labeled the same way, so people don't make this association. So this is the 13th card as well, right? It's called Catoni. And when you first look at it, you're like, is this the death card? It's the 13th card. No one online, from what I can see, is making this association. There's a lot of mysteries in this deck, actually, that are still waiting to kind of be uncovered. And I'm pretty convinced, actually, that this is one of them. So what is actually being shown here is a figure. Obviously, you see this gigantic head. Here we're dealing with severed heads once again. And what's being created actually is a subliminal scythe. And so that spear pierces the head, and then it's making a subliminal scythe with that shield. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you this hidden scythe. There it is. So you're actually dealing with the same symbolism. So you're dealing with an aspect of death with this scythe, harvester of souls, and you're dealing with this gigantic head. And so when I was looking at this card, I'm like, what is this all about? Like, why is the head so large here in comparison to the guy's head? And I kind of chalk it up to it being kind of like a, I don't know, what do I usually refer to it? Just like an astro-mythological sort of storyline. So when Scorpio is rising, Taurus is falling, right? It relates to the Mithraic mysteries, actually. So I'm not sure if you've studied the symbolism of Mithras slaying the bull, but Mithras slays a bull. And one of the little details I've always found very, very interesting is that the bull's testicles are being pinched by a scorpion. I'm not sure if you've ever noticed that. But whenever I see that imagery, I think of when the scorpion rises, the bull is falling. And a lot of interesting storylines come to light when you start acknowledging what signs rise above the horizon and which signs dip below the horizon as we progress throughout the year and progress throughout the ages and everything else. So a sign that is also falling when Scorpio is rising is Orion, which is a great hunter. And the story of Orion, one of the storylines is that he gets stung by a scorpion. And so I think that this is kind of all baked into each other. So when the scorpion is rising, Orion is falling, the great hunter is falling. So I think that that's kind of what's being expressed here, is that it's actually the head of a great hunter who succumbs to the scorpion, because when the scorpion is coming into prominence, you know, its time is kind of waning or fading, if you will. And so that's the same thing you're going to see in Mithras slaying the bull as well. That when Taurus is falling, the scorpion is rising, essentially. And so this deck, I mean, there's a lot to be said about a lot of other aspects of this deck, and potentially what that star is up there in the upper right-hand corner. There's speculation with that, but more than anything, I'm just kind of convinced that it's in the same lineage of the death card that I just showed you there. So I thought that was worth sharing with you guys. And then we've kind of talked about it already, and I don't know if I have too many things to add, but the next slide here being the phoenix, right, rising from the ashes. And that really symbolically kind of relates to all of this underworld symbolism that we've been discussing already. So it's like winter or fall becomes winter, only to become spring and then summer. These are necessary cycles, right? You go to sleep so you can wake up in the morning. The sun needs to go away so that it can return in the morning, you know? So it's just like, it's just how things operate and how things work. So I think if there's a metaphor for, you know, the sort of positive aspects of this underground sort of cycle, I mean, I think it's all beautiful anyway. You know, I love all times of year. I think it's important to acknowledge the seasonal cycles and everything else, but the phoenix definitely being indicative of the return to form after going dormant and everything else. And then I wanted to kind of note that a few people have made a correspondence out of the tip of the arrow with Sagittarius and the stinger of the scorpion. And so as we transition here to Sagittarius, which I only have a couple of things to mention about Sagittarius really, but I just want to talk about its relationship with Scorpio. So as I've been saying, the relationship between each sign as they pass from one to the other, it's like a whole little breakdown of things that you can look into and decode. But one of the things is the stinger and the tip of the arrow. And now, after however many years of doing this, I kind of think that they might be one and the same symbolically. And so it's not terribly common, but there are versions of sky maps out there where they show literally the arrow being pointed directly at the stinger, right? So here's just one example of that. And then you can see another example if we progress forward to the next slide. So I think there's something to be said about that, right? And their close proximity to each other. Also, if we progress to the next slide, so the next couple of slides show you like older Sumerian, Babylonian depictions of Sagittarius, which was known as Pabalsag. And you'll notice that this figure here literally has the tail of a scorpion. So here you see an older version of Sagittarius. These illustrations come from a book called Babylonian Star Lore, by the way. I always shout it out because there's so much good information in there. And so this figure was known as being a psychopomp. And so he was a guide of souls. So he took people to the afterlife. He took people to the underworld. And it makes a lot of sense that he would have wings. That's not uncommon for these types of figures. And it would make sense that he's also associated with a horse as well. So whenever I look at journey or travel symbols, I've probably mentioned this here before, but whether it's a horse or a chariot or a boat, an ark, a train, a car, to me, the deep, deep, deep sort of symbolic encode with all of that stuff is, yes, it's journeying from place to place, but it's also journeying from this domain to the next one, to the great beyond, or to the underworld or other side, or whatever you want to say. And so the fact that Sagittarius was once looked at as this figure that would take people to the other side and journey between realms and domains, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And so here you see that he has the scorpion tail there, further linking him to Scorpio. And then if you progress, there's just another version where you can see his scorpion tail as well. So I always find it fascinating that there's these fusions, between signs. I'm always kind of looking out for that. And then also linking it to Scorpio. Notice that phallus right there, right? And then notice that there's even a smaller scorpion, what it looks like, closely to it. It almost looks like it's going to pinch it or something like that, right? So very scorpionic in nature, I would say. But
where do we get it? Where's this headed?
Right. Well, it's headed, or what I was going to say is that, well, I don't know, actually. That's a very good question, because I don't have too much on Sagittarius here, but I did want to mention the aiming aspect. Its mantra is I aim, right? You already brought up the target, bullseye sort of symbolism and everything else. I think it's fascinating that Sagittarius always is about to let go of its arrow. And when you look into like martial arts, like I made a video about the Japanese martial art of Kyudo, and they say that the hardest part to master is letting go, actually. And so they have all of these ritualistic ways of like getting in form, and they have their like ritualistic garb and everything else. But they say that the hardest part to master, even people who are seasoned and whatever, is actually that final moment when you let go of the arrow. And so to me, that's very, very interesting. There's something very therapeutic when I think about this as well. And I think of Chiron's relationship with Sagittarius being the wounded healer, and kind of like transmuting traumas and things like that, kind of being a key, I think, to life in a lot of ways. And the Chironic glyph looks like a little key, basically. And so Chiron suffered several major wounds. One of them was the abandonment of his parents. So he was abandoned by his parents because they considered him a freak. He was adopted by the gods, and he became this renowned healer and things like that. But this invisible wound sort of thing, these invisible scars, if you will, the sk sort of thing, kind of getting those integrated or transmuted or whatever kind of language you want to do, doing shadow work or whatever, this is kind of the story of every single healer, actually. A lot of shaman and medicine people, folk people, who do that kind of work. It's not uncommon to hear their story, and their story involves some sort of wound in their early days of life, you know, in their childhood or something along these lines, right? And so it's like when you're able to kind of heal yourself, you can kind of create space for others to heal. So
Yeah, he's got a dog sticking out of his back, right? His
right.
quiver.
Yes.
So the 3 signs associated with dogs, you've got Cancer, canine, but the word jackal, the dog of the underworld, goes back to Scorpio. Jackal might be jack off, right? We're seeing a lot of that here. Jackal, the dog. Well, the hound, the dog of the hunt, hound, thunder. Hounds have a thunderous voice. The hound, this comes from Sagittarius. So the hunting dog is ruled by Sagittarius, the hound. Yeah.
Very interesting, dude. I mean, I'm glad we're talking about the dog thing. I figured you might pick up on that. There's an expression of Mercury, or perhaps Thoth, right? That's known as Hermanubis. And so there's dog symbolism, canine symbolism with Hermes as well, that I think is really fascinating. And so one of the things I've read, Crowley actually said this. He in his entry for the Temperance card, actually, which is ruled by Sagittarius, he says that the arrow is the simplest glyph of Mercury. And Mercury is always associated with the phallus. Here we go again, and all that kind of stuff. So I do see, once again, mercurial symbolism, you know, kind of baked into this figure here. And now when I think of Sagittarius, I also think of Mercury, actually, in so many different ways. Even though the correspondences aren't super direct or whatever, I think there's something to be said about all of that. So anyways, I've got the Sagittarius constellation up next. To be honest, I don't have too much to say about Sagittarius. But I kind of just wanted to bring up the scorpionic kind of connections. And then I thought it was relevant as well because of, you know, this psychopomp, early psychopomp sort of thing that people have kind of associated with the sign. And then lastly, all I got is just the Sagittarius correspondence with the major arcana, which is the Temperance card.
Yeah, temperance comes from temper is what you do with a hammer. To tamp, to beat something down is to tamp. That's why you have Tampa Bay and St. Petersburg. Temperance being ruled by Jupiter.
Yeah.
Rules Sagittarius, St. Peter, Jupiter, Tampa Bay, temperance. Okay. Lightning capital of the world, people. Come on. Thor is residing in that movie.
Totally. Yeah, no, I heard you talk about some of this stuff the other day, and it definitely checks out, man, for sure. This card is so massive and big, I feel like I'm not going to do it justice here towards the end of this presentation or whatever. But I'll fill you in on a recent revelation, I guess. The thing I'm most excited about with this card that I think maybe perhaps checks out. And so I was reading the other day, and the author, it was Kenneth Grant, and he was talking about the number 14 being related to the northern sky. And he said the reason why is because of the 7 stars of Ursa Major and the 7 stars of Ursa Minor, one of those stars being the pole star, Polaris. So he makes the correspondence between literally, esoterically, the number 14 and these 2 constellations, right? Which are known as also, right, the Dippers. So the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. And I thought this was interesting. And I was like, okay, the number 14, Ursa Major Minor, the Dippers. And then I'm like, well, what's the 14th card? I'm like, oh shit, the 14th card is Temperance. Oh shit, well, there's 2 vessels right there, you know? And so literally you have 2 vessels the same way the Dippers are also vessels. And when you look at these constellations in the sky, as they rotate around Polaris, imagine that they do have liquid within them, being Dippers, right? It's like as they rotate around the pole star, they're pouring water from one to the other. It's this perpetual cycle of pouring water from one to the other. And so it makes me wonder if that's actually one of the deeper esoteric correspondences with this card, being related to the number 14, having these 2 vessels being poured from one to the other. And I'll say that another thing that very much relates to this is in the Thoth deck around the figure, you see kind of this rainbow kind of oval sort of shape. And within it is Latin. And I'm not going to say it, but there's 7 words within this rainbow. And essentially, it breaks down to a sentence. And the sentence is, visit the interior parts of the earth, and thou shalt find the hidden stone. And so to me, there's so much alchemical stuff going on here. It kind of blows my mind, to be honest. But it literally is making a reference to the center of the earth as well, which, as you know, has a correspondence with the northern sky, in my opinion. So I think that's perhaps something to chew on, is the northern polar, which, and now I tend to refer to the polar tradition as also the stellar tradition. They're actually one and the same, in my opinion. But I think it might have something to do with all of this stuff that I'm kind of putting out there. And that a lot of alchemical traditions relate to the number 7. 7 has this really interesting dynamic. Obviously, 7 days of the week, 7 colors of the rainbow, things like that. There's a line, or there's a tradition called Azoth alchemy, and there's 7 steps in Azoth alchemy, and the 7 steps, each step relates to one of those words in that sentence. And the first letter in each word, when put together, it creates an acronym, and the acronym spells out vitriol. And so vitriol is a correspondence with this 7-stepped, 7-tiered process of alchemy. And so that phrase or that sentence is basically alluding to that as well. And here you see what she's doing here is she's actually creating. So it's called art, it's called temperance, but I think in a lot of ways you might as well call it alchemy. I think that's one of the things that's kind of going on here.
Sorry, I just had to ban someone. Loser. Bye-bye.
No worries.
It's a Goy's night out, okay? Goy's night out from this point on. Bye-bye. Go back to Lisrael.
Gotcha. It's all good, dude.
Never mind. Sorry.
No, dude, you're solid. Right on, man. So that's what I got for you, dude.
Thank you, man. Great,
yeah.
dude. Mario, sorry, I was getting a little sleepy at the end, but Mario.
Me too.
Mario drops nothing but bombs when he comes on, so I'm very grateful for that. And guys, let's pull this stuff up here. Go give his channel a follow, a like, subscribe. His Instagram, I'm pulling it up as I can.
Many thanks.
For sure, man. Here, let's get this out of the way. Boom. There's his channel. He's on Instagram. Why aren't I subscribed? There you go. I'm subscribed on this channel.
Nice.
Everyone go hit him up. Subscribe, yeah.
For sure.
SS. Join the SS is what I always say.
That's right.
So, but also he's on Instagram and he's active and he's dropping bombs on Instagram for sure. So,
right on, dude. Well, thanks for prompting this. I'm down to do it again whenever you're interested, and I always have a good time.
yeah, man, thank you. Like I said, I learn a lot, and he gives me a run for the words as well. So, and so let's do that. What did we say we were going to do next?
Well, we mentioned perhaps, I would be fascinated. I would love to do it, basically. The world tree. I think there's a lot to chew on with that. I've been thinking a lot about it. And it's really just one of the most holistic sort of symbols out there. So if you're interested in that, and actually there's a lot to say in regards to its correspondence with the underworld and its root system and things like that. So if you're down, we can do that, but we can talk about it off air too.
Yes. No, that sounds like a good topic for the next one. The world tree and tree symbolism, and probably
Totally.
segue into Garden of Eden a little bit too. But
100%.
All right, man. So we'll sign off, and I'll talk to you backstage. But
Yeah,
guys,
sounds good.
go hit them up, tune in, and we'll have them back on soon. So good night, everyone.
All right. See you guys.